The challenge across the stars, the twin suns of Velrath Prime burned over the grand arena, a structure so large it could hold 1,000,000 souls. Alien banners fluttered in the wind, showing symbols of every empire that had bowed to the Velrath dynasty. The air shimmered with heat, dust, and excitement as the greatest warriors from across the galaxy gathered. They came to witness something historic, the royal challenge of Princess Lysara the Unbroken, the undefeated warrior princess of the Velrath Empire. Lysara stood at the center of the arena, her silver armor glowing beneath the alien sky. Her blade, forged from the core of a dying star, hummed softly with power around her. Thousands of alien species cheered her name, chanting in rhythm, their voices shaking the air every year. She challenged the strongest from every world, and every year, she won. She believed no being alive could match her skill or her fury. She raised her weapon high and shouted, "Who will face me today?" Her voice echoed through the arena's amplifiers, spreading far beyond the planet's surface. For a moment, silence answered her. Then the crowd laughed, echoing her arrogance. Convinced no one would dare, she smirked behind her visor, her pride shining brighter than her armor. But then from the edge of the arena, a slow, steady sound broke the silence. The sound of boots on stone. A single figure stepped forward through the dust. He was not tall like the reptilian warriors, nor armored like the metallic synthetics. He wore a simple gray suit of battlecloth, scratched and old. His shoulders squared but calm. It was a human. Whispers filled the stands. "A human?" One alien hissed. "They are a dying race. They are weak, fragile, emotional." Another laughed. "This must be a joke." Even Lysara tilted her head, amused. "You wish to fight me?" she asked, her voice sharp like a blade. The human stopped a few meters away, lifted his eyes and met her gaze without fear. His name was Captain Rian Holt, a soldier from Earth's forgotten defense fleet. He had no reputation, no allies, no audience cheering for him, but his eyes were calm, like the eyes of someone who had already accepted death long ago. He spoke softly, but his voice carried through the arena. "I don't need to win," he said. "I just need to show you who we are." The laughter stopped. Even Lysara's expression shifted slightly beneath her helmet. She had faced thousands of opponents, but never one who sounded like that. He did not speak like a challenger. He spoke like a reminder. The gates closed behind them, locking the arena. Energy fields shimmered in the air as the match began. Lysara moved first, her blade cutting through the air faster than sound. Ryan didn't block. He stepped aside, the blade missing him by inches. The crowd gasped. Lysara attacked again, each strike faster, harder, more brutal than the last, but Rian dodged, rolled, and slipped past every swing, using nothing but movement and instinct. He didn't fight like a trained alien warrior. He fought like someone who had spent his life surviving. She growled, frustrated, her pride flickering like fire. "This is not a dance, human, fight me!" she roared. But Ryan didn't answer. He picked up a handful of dust and threw it at her feet. The fine particles disrupted her armor sensors for half a second, enough time for him to slip behind her and tap her shoulder with his empty hand. The entire arena went silent. A human had just touched the warrior princess without being cut down. Lysara turned slowly, her eyes narrowing. "That was luck," she hissed. Ryan gave a small smile. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe humans learn fast." For the first time in her career, she felt something she had never known. Curiosity mixed with doubt. The crowd murmured restlessly, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. Alien commanders leaned forward, watching closely, realizing this human was not what they expected. Ryan stood still, waiting, breathing slowly, studying her armor's joints, her stance, her rhythm. He wasn't fighting her strength, he was studying her weakness. Lysara lifted her sword again, anger now rising in her tone. "You are brave, human," she said, "but bravery is not power." She struck again, her blade smashing into the arena floor, sending shockwaves through the sand. Ryan was thrown back, sliding, his uniform torn, but he stood again. He looked at her with the same steady eyes, unbroken. "You might be right," he said quietly. "But humans don't need power to win." The audience was frozen. Even the commentators had stopped speaking. The princess, the undefeated champion of 1,000 battles, was now fighting not a warrior but an idea. Ryan's presence itself had become a challenge to her empire's pride. Lysara's heart beat faster, her instincts screaming that this was no ordinary opponent. Somewhere deep inside her, for the first time, she felt respect as the first round ended. the arena filled with whispers and confusion. Who was this human? Where did he come from? And why, despite being outmatched in every way, did he stand so calm and unshaken? Lysara lowered her sword and looked at him across the arena. "You fight without fear," she said, her voice quieter now. Ryan nodded once. "Because fear is a luxury my world can't afford." Her expression softened for just a moment, then hardened again. "Good," she said. "Then let's see how long your courage lasts." The arena lights flared, and the match reset for the next round. But something had already changed in the hearts of all who watched. For the first time in Velrath history, the galaxy's strongest warrior felt uncertain, and the universe began to whisper a new question. Can humanity truly stand against the stars? The human who should have been afraid. The arena lights dimmed for a moment as the crowd's noise faded into a tense hush. Dust floated in the air like smoke after a storm. At the center of it all stood Rian Holt, the lone human, his chest rising slowly as he caught his breath. Across from him, Princess Lysara tightened her grip on her blade, her pride stinging like fire beneath her skin. No one had ever lasted this long against her. Every opponent before him had either begged for mercy or fallen within seconds. Yet this fragile human stood steady. With nothing but a calm look in his eyes, he should have been afraid. But he wasn't. From the high balcony, alien nobles whispered among themselves. "What kind of creature is this?" asked a scaled warlord. "He bleeds like us, but he doesn't yield," another murmured. The Emperor himself leaned forward, his many eyes unblinking, watching this strange contest unfold. Lysara raised her weapon again, her voice sharp and proud. "You're persistent, human," she said. "But this is no place for fragile species." Ryan's expression didn't change. He looked at her not with hatred but with understanding. He could see in her movements the pattern of someone who had never been truly tested. When the signal rang, Lysara lunged forward like a lightning strike. Her sword cut through the air with such force that it tore the sand beneath her. Ryan ducked, rolled, and slid across the arena floor. The blade missed his neck by inches, the wind of it nearly knocking him over. The crowd gasped again, half in awe, half in disbelief. He moved with no armor, no shield, only instinct and experience. Each motion looked desperate. But it wasn't, it was calculated. He was watching her, learning, adapting, every step refining his reaction. He wasn't faster, but he was becoming smarter. Lysara swung again, this time striking the ground near his feet. The impact cracked the floor, dust exploding into the air for a few seconds. Ryan disappeared in the cloud. Lysara smiled behind her helmet, certain she had finally ended the match. But then a shadow moved through the smoke. He came from behind her again, silent as a ghost. She spun and blocked just in time, sparks flying as her blade met a piece of shattered metal. Ryan had picked up a broken fragment of the arena's floor and used it to deflect her weapon. The force sent him tumbling backward, but he landed on his knees and stood again. His hands bled, but his eyes remained cold and focused. Lysara lowered her sword slightly, just enough to study him. "You fight like you've already lost," she said. "Why do you keep standing?" Ryan wiped the blood from his fingers and replied quietly, "Because standing is the only thing humans know how to do." For a brief moment, something flickered in her chest. Not anger, but curiosity. No one had ever answered her pride with such simplicity. No one had ever fought her without the desire to win. It was strange, and it unsettled her. From the edge of the arena, alien commanders took notes, their translators humming. Some murmured, "Humans. Adaptation rate unpredictable," others whispered. "Their endurance is illogical for their biology." And still, the fight continued. Lysara pressed harder, her attacks faster now, her movement fluid like a storm. Every blow forced Rian backward. She could see him tiring. Yet his resolve only grew stronger. He started countering her rhythm. A small sidestep here, a low crouch there, using minimal energy. It wasn't power that kept him moving, it was survival. He had learned every lesson through pain, through war, through loss. Every alien swing reminded him of battles on ruined Earth. The smoke of burning cities, the screams of his people, the promise he made to never let humanity be mocked again. That memory fueled his every breath. Lysara leaped into the air, landing with a shockwave that sent Rian sprawling. Her sword pressed against his chest, inches from piercing his heart. The crowd cheered wildly, thinking it was over. But Rian didn't close his eyes. He didn't beg. He looked at her calmly and said, "If this is your victory, then you've already lost." She froze. The words hit harder than any weapon. His tone wasn't defiant, it was honest. Almost sorrowful, she pulled her blade back slowly, unsure why her hand trembled. The crowd waited for the final strike. But it never came. Lysara stepped back, confused. No opponent had ever made her hesitate before. Why couldn't she finish this human? Why did his quiet confidence shake her so deeply? From the royal stands, her father's voice thundered, "Finish him, my daughter. Show the galaxy the strength of Velrath blood." But she couldn't, her heart, once filled with pride. Now burned with questions, Ryan stood again, blood dripping from his lip. He didn't lift a weapon, he just said, "You fight for pride. I fight for meaning." His words echoed through the arena. Heavy and strange, no alien knew what to make of them. Even the Emperor went silent. Lysara's sword trembled in her hand. For the first time in her life, she saw power without cruelty, strength without domination, and it terrified her. The announcer's voice trembled as he declared the round incomplete. Never before had the princess refused to strike. Never before had the audience seen her look uncertain. And never before had a human stood undefeated in her arena. As the crowd dispersed, Lysara watched Rian walk toward the exit gate. He didn't look back, he didn't raise his hands in victory. He simply walked away, quiet and steady. Her heart pounded as she whispered to herself, "This human, he fights like a ghost of something greater." She didn't know it yet. But this duel had already begun to change the fate of the galaxy. Echoes of Earth, the night fell heavy over Velrath Prime. The great arena, once roaring with voices, now stood silent under the twin moons. Only a few guards remained at their posts, their armor glinting in the pale blue light. Inside her private chamber, Princess Lysara sat alone, her sword resting across her knees. She replayed the battle in her mind again and again. Every move, every look, every word the human had spoken echoed inside her head. He had been slower, weaker, smaller, and yet somehow untouchable. His calm eyes had seen through her pride like glass. She had faced monsters that could tear planets apart, but never someone who fought without anger. Her advisor entered quietly, his insect-like eyes flickering. "My princess," he said. "The council demands an explanation. You spared the human, and the Emperor is displeased." Lysara didn't answer at first. She only whispered, "He was not afraid." The advisor tilted his head. Then perhaps he was foolish. But Lysara's voice grew firm. No, it was something else. Something I've never seen before. Meanwhile, far below the palace, Ryan Holt sat in a dim holding cell. He wasn't bound, only observed. Two alien guards whispered outside, watching him through the glowing energy field. "He doesn't sleep," one said. "He just sits and stares at the stars," the other replied uneasily. Inside, Rian's mind was not on the arena. But far away, he saw Earth again. Broken skies filled with fire, cities in ruin, oceans turned black. He remembered the first invasion, not the Velrath, but another empire that thought humans were nothing. They had underestimated a species that refused to die. He had been a young officer then. He remembered his commander's words before the final stand. "They think fear will break us," the man said. "Let them learn. Fear is what makes us stronger." That was the day Ryan understood what it meant to be human. Not to conquer, but to endure even when the world burned. Humans rebuilt, even when they fell, they rose again, back in the present. The silence of the alien cell was almost peaceful. Ryan looked at the stars beyond the transparent wall and smiled faintly. Somewhere out there, humanity was still fighting, still surviving, and he would not be the one to make them look weak. Up above, Lysara walked through the royal archives. Her mind restless, she called for the ancient holographic database and said, "Show me everything about the species called human." The blue light flickered, bringing up files from forgotten wars. She watched images of humans fighting against overwhelming odds. Outnumbered, outgunned, still standing. She saw soldiers shielding children from alien fire, doctors working through bombed hospitals, and ordinary people staring at the sky as fire rained down, yet refusing to kneel. The princess whispered to herself, "So this is their kind." There was no glory in their history, only survival. But it was the kind of survival that felt unbreakable. Her heart stirred with something she couldn't name. Admiration, maybe envy. Suddenly the door opened and her father, Emperor Varthar, entered. His massive frame filled the room, his many eyes burning with fury. "You embarrass our bloodline," he growled. "A human stood against you and lived." Lysara met his gaze without bowing. "He fought with honor," she said calmly. The Emperor's voice thundered. Honor? He is a savage animal from a forgotten planet. But Lysara's tone sharpened. Then why did he make me hesitate? Her father paused. He had no answer, only anger. He turned away and said, End this nonsense. Destroy him in the next challenge. Show the galaxy that Velrath power cannot be questioned. And with that, he left her chambers, his heavy footsteps echoing down the hall. Lysara stood alone again. Staring at the holograms in the reflection, she saw her own face beside the face of a human soldier from centuries ago. Two warriors, separated by galaxies, but both carrying the same unyielding fire. Later that night, when the guards brought food to Ryan's cell, a shadow appeared behind them. The guard stepped aside quickly and bowed. It was Lysara. Her armor was gone, replaced with a simple dark cloak, her expression unreadable. Ryan stood, his eyes calm as always. Princess, he said softly. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking. You could have killed me in that duel, she said. Why didn't you? Ryan tilted his head slightly. Because killing you would have proved nothing, he said. Winning isn't always victory, she frowned. Confused. No one speaks to me that way, she murmured. Ryan smiled faintly. Maybe that's the problem. For the first time, Lysara felt something like humility. This fragile creature, this human, spoke with more strength than most generals. She asked quietly, What drives you, Ryan Holt of Earth? He looked toward the stars through the cell window. The memory of what we lost, he said, and the hope that one day we'll be more than survivors. Her heart trembled at his words. They carried no arrogance, no threat, nay, only truth in that moment. She realized the galaxy had misjudged humanity. They were not weak because they bled. They were strong because they stood again after bleeding. As she turned to leave, she whispered almost to herself, You are not what I expected, Ryan replied quietly. No one ever expects humans until it's too late. The doors closed behind her, and the echo of those words lingered in her mind like a storm, building on the horizon. She didn't know it yet, but the next battle would not be about victory. It would be about understanding, and when it came, the fate of empires would shift forever. The fall of the princess, the next dawn rose red over Velrath Prime. The arena shimmered under the morning sun, filled again with millions of spectators from every corner of the galaxy. Rumors had spread like wildfire overnight. The human challenger who defied death, who stood unbroken before the princess, had become the talk of every world. The Emperor sat upon his golden throne high above the arena. His expression dark and heavy. He had ordered this rematch himself. This time, he had said, no mercy, no hesitation, no honor, only victory. And so the princess prepared for what would be the most important duel of her life. Lysara stood in her private chamber before the battle, her armor gleaming brighter than before. But her heart was restless. She looked at her reflection, seeing not the warrior princess, but the uncertain figure behind the metal. For the first time, her confidence felt like armor too heavy to bear. Her advisor entered quietly, bowing low. My princess, he said. The human waits in the arena. She didn't respond, only nodded and whispered, Let them witness truth today. When she stepped onto the sands, the noise of the crowd shook the air like thunder. Banners waved, lights flickered, and the scent of ion dust burned through the atmosphere. Across from her stood Ryan Holt, calm, silent, unarmored, holding nothing but a simple steel rod as his weapon. He looked ordinary, yet somehow unstoppable. The announcer's voice echoed through the sky. The second challenge begins, Princess Lysara of Velrath against Captain Ryan Holt of humanity. The crowd roared. Eager for blood, eager for glory, Lysara raised her sword high and pointed it at him. Today, human, she said coldly, I end this insult. Ryan gave a faint smile, his eyes steady. If you believe that, Princess, he said softly, then you've already lost. Her anger surged like fire. With a scream of fury, she launched forward, her movements faster than lightning. Every strike split the air, each blow heavy enough to crush bone. Ryan blocked, dodged, slipped aside, his motions small and precise. The ground cracked beneath their feet, the clash of metal echoing like thunder. Lysara's strength was overwhelming, yet every swing missed by a breath. The human moved like water, always flowing, never resisting head-on. Her frustration grew. How do you keep avoiding death? she shouted, her voice sharp and furious. Ryan's answer was calm. Because death isn't what I fear, he said. Failure is. Her rage blinded her. She struck wildly, forgetting form, forgetting rhythm. Ryan sidestepped, using her own power against her. In one motion, he caught her blade between the broken edges of his steel rod, twisting hard. The princess gasped as her sword flew from her hands and landed far across the arena. The entire stadium fell silent. No one moved, no one spoke. For the first time in her reign, the warrior princess was disarmed. Lysara stood frozen, staring at her empty hands. Her mind screamed denial, her heart trembled. She lunged forward, trying to strike with her fists, but Ryan blocked her effortlessly. He didn't attack, he only stepped closer, lowering his weapon. Enough, he said quietly. You've proven your strength, now learn what it means. She stumbled backward, chest heaving, her pride cracking like glass. Her father's voice roared from above. Finish him! Crush him! Redeem your name! But Lysara didn't move. She looked at Ryan and, for the first time, saw not a rival but a mirror. He stood unarmed, his hands open, his breath calm. He could have struck her, humiliated her, ended everything, but he didn't. He simply watched her, his expression soft, almost sorrowful. Your strength is real, he said, but it's chained by pride. Let go of it, and you'll be unstoppable. Tears burned her eyes beneath the visor, though she didn't understand why. Every word hit deeper than a wound. The galaxy's strongest warrior stood shaking before a man without armor, a man who refused to fight, yet could not be defeated from the stands. Whispers filled the air like wind through leaves. The princess has fallen, one alien murmured. No, another said. She's awakening. Lysara dropped to one knee, not in surrender, but in realization. She looked up at the human and whispered, You could have killed me, yet you didn't. Ryan's voice was calm, steady as stone. Because humans don't fight to destroy, he said. We fight to endure. The silence that followed was unlike any the arena had known. Even the Emperor sat motionless, unable to speak around the galaxy. Live transmission showed a single image, the undefeated alien princess kneeling before a human. Lysara rose slowly, her head bowed. I understand now, she said quietly. Strength is not power, it is purpose. Ryan nodded once. And purpose is what your people have forgotten. The Emperor's voice cracked through the air again, full of rage and disbelief. This duel is void. The human tricked her. Guards, seize him. But Lysara turned sharply, her voice cutting through the noise. No one touches him, she commanded, her tone filled with new authority. He has earned his freedom. The guards hesitated, torn between loyalty and fear. The Emperor's fury burned, but even he saw it. Something had changed in his daughter, something unstoppable. As Ryan turned to leave the arena, he looked back once. The princess stood tall again. But her eyes were different now, no longer filled with arrogance, but with understanding. For the first time in her life, she bowed her head slightly and said, Humanity is far greater than we ever believed. Ryan smiled faintly. Maybe one day, he said. You'll see how far we've yet to go. He walked away as the crowd watched in stunned silence. No victory cheers, no triumphant shouts, only awe, because that day, the galaxy didn't witness the fall of a warrior. It witnessed the rise of a legend. The human code. The galaxy did not sleep that night across thousands of star systems. Holograms replayed the moment when the mighty warrior princess knelt before a human. For the first time in recorded history, the universe saw power bow before mercy. Some called it weakness, others called it a miracle, but everyone remembered it. On Velrath Prime, silence filled the grand palace. The Emperor raged behind closed doors, his voice echoing down marble halls. Yet his daughter, Princess Lysara, remained calm, sitting by the great window that overlooked the City of Lights. Her reflection showed not a warrior, but someone searching for meaning. She remembered the look in Ryan's eyes. No hatred, no fear, no victory, and only understanding. She had expected arrogance from a conqueror, but found compassion from a soldier. It unsettled her more than any defeat when morning came. Lysara walked to the prison chamber once again. Ryan stood inside, as calm as always, gazing through the transparent wall toward the stars. Do humans not sleep? She asked, trying to hide the emotion in her voice. He smiled faintly. We learned to rest with one eye open. She stepped closer, her armor soft against the floor. My father wants you executed before the next dawn, she said quietly. Ryan nodded as if it meant nothing. I expected that, her brow furrowed. You aren't afraid? His reply was calm, almost gentle. Fear doesn't stop death, princess. It only stops life. His words echoed through her like a song she couldn't forget. She turned away, trying to hide the confusion in her chest. You confuse me, human, she admitted. You should hate me, yet you speak with peace. Ryan looked down, his voice low. Where I come from, hate is easy. Understanding is harder. That's why it matters more. The guards exchanged glances, silently shaken by his tone. Even they, proud soldiers of the Velrath, felt something shift within. It was the kind of quiet power no weapon could command. Later that day, Lysera stood before the royal council. Old alien generals hissed and muttered in anger. This human has poisoned your mind. Princess, one shouted, he's dangerous. Lysera lifted her gaze, calm but firm. No, she said. He's something we've never been at free. The chamber erupted in outrage, but her words could not be unheard. For centuries, their empire ruled by strength. By fear, by obedience. Now one human had shattered that illusion with mercy. That night she made her decision. She entered Ryan's cell one last time, deactivating the energy field with a code known only to royalty. The hum of power vanished, and the air grew still. You can escape now, she said. I will take the blame. Ryan looked at her, his eyes warm but unyielding. I won't run, he said. If I flee, I become the thing they think I am. Lysera frowned, confused again. Then what will you do? She asked. Ryan's answer was simple. I'll teach. Teach what? She whispered. The human code, he said. The rule that kept us alive when the universe tried to erase us. She tilted her head slightly. And what is this code? Ryan stepped closer, his voice calm. Never let strength blind you. Never let pride rule you. Never let mercy die. He paused for a moment before adding softly. And never, ever, forget who you stand for. Lysera felt something shift deep within her. It was as if her entire life had been written in shadow until that moment. She had fought for victory, but never for purpose. She had conquered worlds, but never herself, she whispered. You speak as if your world still lives. Ryan's gaze turned distant. In every human it does, for a moment. Silence filled the room. The stars outside shimmered through the glass like old memories. Suddenly, alarms blared across the palace. The Emperor's voice thundered through the communication halls. The human is to be executed immediately. Guards to the lower decks. Lysera's heart raced. She looked at Ryan and said quickly, You must go now. But Ryan stood still, calm even as chaos erupted. If I die, he said, let them see how a human faces death. She stared at him, stunned by his serenity. Then something broke inside her. The chain of obedience. The fear of her father's will. No, she said fiercely. You will not die here. She drew her sword, turning it on her own guards. They hesitated in disbelief as their princess shouted, Stand down! When they refused, she disarmed them one by one. Her movements swift and precise. Within minutes, Ryan stood free, the alarm still echoing through the corridors. He looked at her with quiet gratitude. You just defied your empire for a human, he said softly. She smiled faintly, her voice steady. No, Captain Holt, she said. I defied it for truth. Together, they ran through the royal corridors toward the hangar bay. The sound of boots thundered behind them, energy bolts lighting the air. Ryan stopped once, covering her with a blast shield as sparks flew past. She looked at him and whispered, You protect even your enemies, he smiled faintly. Only until they learn not to be. As they reached the hangar, a single transport ship waited. Lysera turned to him. Go. Return to your people, but Ryan shook his head. This fight isn't about one world anymore. He looked at her firmly. It's about what kind of galaxy we want to build. The words hung heavy in the air. And in that moment, Lysera realized that strength was not what frightened her. It was the idea that he might be right. That humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its armies, but its heart. As the ship lifted into the night, the alarm still screamed. But something had changed forever. The Princess of Velrath had seen the human code, and she knew the galaxy would never be the same again. The princess's awakening, Velrath Prime, had never known silence like this. The grand empire that once ruled by fear now trembled under whispers. The Emperor's daughter had freed a human, and that single act cracked the pillars of an empire built on pride. Throughout the galaxy, species whispered the same question. Has the unbroken princess changed sides? In the high tower of her palace, Lysara stood before the window, her armor discarded. The sunrise painted her face in gold and crimson light. She no longer felt like the warrior the galaxy adored. She felt human. The council demanded her arrest, her father demanded her loyalty, but her heart no longer belonged to their laws, it belonged to something greater, something Ryan Holt had left behind, the human code. Down in the hangar, the empty cell ship was gone. The human had vanished into the stars, leaving only silence where defiance had once echoed. And yet his words still burned in her memory. Never let Mercy die. Every step she took through the palace felt heavier. Her guards avoided her eyes. Her generals spoke behind her back. But Lysara no longer cared about glory. She cared about truth that evening. She summoned her most trusted warriors. They entered the hall cautiously. Uncertain whether to salute or draw weapons, she looked at them and said quietly, "I freed the human." Gasps filled the chamber. Before they could speak, she raised a hand. "I did it because he showed me something no war ever could," one of her captains growled. "He humiliated you before the galaxy." Lysara stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "He revealed my weakness," she said, "and in doing so, gave me strength." The warriors fell silent, unsure what to say. "Strength," she continued, "is not the power to destroy, it's the power to change." Her voice grew firm. "From this day, Velrath will no longer rule through fear. We will rule through honor." They stared at her as if hearing blasphemy, but her conviction burned brighter than their doubts. Meanwhile, far beyond the palace walls, Ryan Holt's small ship drifted through the void. He watched the twin suns of Velrath grow smaller behind him. He didn't know if he would live long enough to reach human space. But for the first time in years, he felt peace. He had planted something far greater than victory. He had planted hope. Back on Velrath Prime, rebellion simmered. The Emperor's wrath grew colder, sharper. He saw his daughter as a traitor, a wound in his legacy. But Lysara did not bend in the great assembly. She stood before her father, her armor replaced by simple robes. The Emperor's voice thundered, "You freed the enemy of our kind." Lysara's reply was steady. "I freed a teacher." The chamber erupted, but she didn't flinch. "The human showed me the truth," she said. "Our empire stands tall, but it stands on fear. And fear is hollow." The Emperor slammed his staff into the ground, the sound like thunder. "You speak treason," he roared. Lysara met his gaze calmly. "I speak truth," she said. "And truth doesn't bow." The guards hesitated, waiting for the Emperor's order. But he saw something in her eyes, something unbreakable. He realized that though he could imprison her body, he could not cage her mind that night. Lysara stood on the balcony overlooking the city. Thousands of lights glimmered below, each one a life she had once ruled through power. Now she wanted to rule through purpose, and though Ryan was gone, his presence lingered in every heartbeat of her empire. In the distant dark of space, Ryan watched the galaxy's encrypted broadcasts flicker across his console. Reports spoke of unrest on Velrath Prime, of soldiers refusing to fight, of commanders questioning orders. He smiled faintly. "The code spreads," he whispered, "just like it always does." Weeks passed, and something strange began to happen across the galaxy. Small colonies under Velrath control started opening communications with humans. Trade ships that once avoided Earth now carried supplies and letters of peace. The tide was shifting, not through war, but through words. Lysara began meeting secretly with scholars, diplomats, and even enemy envoys. She spoke of unity, of rebuilding, of a future where strength came from trust instead of conquest. Many mocked her, but more listened, because they had seen the human stand alone and win without violence. Still, danger grew closer. The Emperor's loyalists plotted her downfall. They saw her compassion as corruption, her mercy as madness. One night, assassins came, and silent, swift, merciless. But Lysara was ready. She fought not with rage, but with precision, every movement guided by calm purpose. When the last assassin fell, she whispered, "Ryan was right. Mercy doesn't mean weakness." Word spread faster than light. The Princess of Velrath had survived an imperial assassination, and she had spared the last attacker's life, sending him back with a message. "Tell the Emperor, I am no longer his daughter. I am a warrior of peace." The galaxy trembled. Empires that had stood for millennia now watched the birth of something new. a code that could not be destroyed, because it lived in every being who chose compassion over control. And somewhere among the stars the human smiled, because even if his name was forgotten, his message would remain. In the heart of a princess, in the spirit of an empire, and in the awakening of a galaxy that finally began to understand what humanity truly was. The legend of the human warrior years passed and the galaxy was no longer the same. The Velrath Empire, once feared and untouchable, began to change under Princess Lysara's new rule. The banners of conquest were lowered and in their place rose emblems of unity. Her voice carried across the stars, speaking not of domination but of understanding. She spoke of the code of humanity, of mercy, of purpose, of courage in the face of the impossible. And though many resisted, more began to listen, because the memory of one human still haunted the galaxy like a distant light that refused to fade. Legends grew around the name Ryan Holt. Some said he returned to Earth. Some whispered he vanished into deep space, carrying the seed of peace to forgotten worlds. Others believed he died among the stars, his ship drifting silently toward infinity. But every story shared one truth, that a single human changed everything. In the great archives of Velrath Prime, a statue was built, not of the Emperor, not of the princess, but of the human who defied fear. He stood tall, holding no weapon, only a simple steel rod, the same one he used in the duel. At the base were carved his final words to Lysara. Never let mercy die. Every year, millions from every world came to stand before that statue. They bowed not out of fear, but out of respect. Even children from distant colonies knew his name. They called him the Silent Flame, the warrior who burned without hate. Lysara often visited the monument alone. She would stand before it at sunrise, the light glinting off the stone face that looked so calm. She would whisper, "You were right, Ryan Holt." The galaxy needed a teacher, not a conqueror. And though there was no answer, she could almost feel the warmth of his presence in the wind. Under her reign, the Velrath became protectors instead of tyrants. They built alliances with the humans of Earth. Trade, culture, and friendship replaced fear. The same species once mocked as weak now guided empires toward peace. Humanity had not built the strongest fleet, nor the largest army, but they had built something no one else could. Faith. Faith that compassion could outlast cruelty. Faith that courage could outshine power. Faith that even a fragile creature could change the stars. In the distant outer rim, on a quiet planet rich with green fields and blue skies, a small group of settlers built a colony called New Dawn at its center. They placed a simple stone marker engraved with words passed down for generations. They mocked the human spirit, and it became their salvation. Centuries later, when historians spoke of the wars of old, they no longer spoke of blood or empire. They spoke of the age of the human code, an age where mercy became might and compassion became law. Old alien warriors would tell young recruits, "Fight like a human, with heart." Even the great academies of battle began teaching a lesson from the forgotten Earth commander. Victory means nothing if you lose your soul, and in time, the stars themselves began to tell the story. Travelers swore that sometimes when space was silent, they heard a faint echo on comms, a human voice whispering through the static, "Stand your ground, but never lose your mercy." Lysara grew old, her hair silver like starlight, but her spirit burned bright as ever in her final years. She wrote a message for the galaxy. To the future rulers of every world, she wrote, "Remember the human who faced me without hate. Remember that true strength is not in domination, but in restraint." When she died, the galaxy mourned her as the peace-forged princess, and beside her in the royal tomb stood two statues, hers and Ryan Holt's side by side, their hands reaching toward the same star. Carved forever in light generations later, as new explorers charted unknown galaxies, they carried his code on every ship. A simple phrase painted on the hulls of human vessels, "Never let mercy die," and thus, the legend of the human warrior lived on, not as a myth, not as a tale of war, but as a truth carved into the soul of creation itself. That one act of kindness can echo louder than 1,000 battles. That one human can change the destiny of worlds, and as the stars turned silently over the endless void, a single voice seemed to whisper from the darkness once more, "Humanity endures."